Okay. So we would like to talk about the trip we're going to lead in China. And so on this Zoom call presentation, you have Sine, who is director of the Body College. You have Bina, who is executive director of the travel company. Then you have Shantum, who is the director of the company and is also the guide, will be with us. And then, of course, you have myself, Martine Batchelor, and Stephen Batchelor. We're going to also be part of the guiding. And so first, we want to really welcome you to this trying to understand, to know what is it we're doing, why we're doing it. And Stephen will start.
So it's lovely to see you all. And I'll just give really a very sort of personal impression of what this journey might mean, at least what it means for me. Martine and I were last visiting Buddhist temples in China about 40 years ago, in 1985, 1986. And we haven't been back to do this kind of thing since. So from our point of view, we're very keen to see exactly what is actually in place now in China. As I'm sure many of you are aware, during the Cultural Revolution, a lot of the monastic centers were either closed down or they were damaged in some way. Now, over the last 20, 30 years, there's been an incredible effort to rebuild the Buddhist infrastructure in China. So we're going to be really exposed to two things on this trip. We're going to see these ancient sites, but we're also going to see how Buddhism is alive in China today. We will be interacting with Chinese people. We'll meet along all of the places we go. And so in that sense, it's going to be a discovery on many fronts. Antiquity, some of the most beautiful works of Buddhist art in China we'll be exploring. Rock-cut caves, as some of you have already done in India, we'll be there seeing those as well. We'll also be going to Wutaishan, the five-peak mountain, which is one of the most important pilgrimage sites in China, a favorite site, in fact, of the Tibetans. There'll probably be a lot of Tibetans there. It's the sacred mountain of Manjushri, the Bodhisattva of wisdom. But we'll start in Dunhuang. Dunhuang is right up on the edge of the Gobi Desert, and it's an extraordinary place, a rock-cut monastery with very beautiful Central Asian / Chinese frescoes and paintings. Back in the beginning of the 20th century, there was discovered there an intact library of Buddhist texts from the 8th century, which had been sealed off and then were at that early 20th century rediscovered, which has been extraordinarily important in our understanding of Chinese Buddhism, early Tibetan Buddhism, Central Asian Buddhism, and so on. But perhaps for many of us, what will make this trip different to a standard sort of tourist visit is that we will be going as a community. We think of ourselves as a kind of a sangha, temporary sangha, on the road, traveling by bus and train and whatever transport is available. And this will be an opportunity to experience and explore Chinese Buddhism, and not as simply a disinterested visitor to a museum, but we will seek in each of the places we go to try to symbolically return them to their original purpose and function. In other words, we'll try to find quiet places where we can sit in meditation, we can look at texts, we can explore ideas that are characteristic of Buddhism in China as opposed to elsewhere. So we see it as a mix, both of discovery, but also as a return to the sources of Buddhist tradition in that part of the world, and constantly coming back to our own lived experience of being a pilgrim on this particular journey. So I hope that you would find such a trip to be of interest. We certainly will. and we look forward very much perhaps to seeing you on it. Thank you.
So personally, I think what also will be interesting is that Buddhism is very alive in China today. I was recently in China. I was taken to visit Buddhist temple, and a lot of people were doing ceremony and offering incense and candle and chanting. So actually, the place are very likely to be very active. And so we will, in a way, participate with that devotion, with that interest on the Buddhist path, on the Buddha Dharma. At the same time, the way we do the travel is we're going to kind of look at different aspects of Buddhism in China, from the ancient influence with the Tuwan cave to then we're going to also meet Tibetan Buddhism. I'm really interested in going to Jining, because there you have the Kumbum. I mean, I don't know how much we'll be able to visit the Kumbum because it's such a huge, huge Buddhist Tibetan temple. In Jining, you have also all kind of other Buddhist temple, Chinese, Tibetan. So again, we see how much time we have, because the riches there are quite amazing. And then we're going to go to Loyang, which for me is like where very important, because you have the Bai Maser, you have the beginning of the translation bureau, and that with Kumarajiva. And so for me, this is a very important place. But we saw it 40 years ago, and now looking on the map, it's 10 times bigger. So it will be interesting in a way because of kind of the simplicity of the temples we met 40 years ago, to maybe how now the state is supporting it. And at the same time, like in the Bai Maser, everybody, you have a Thai temple, you have this temple, that temple. It looked like it become kind of a special Buddhist place in Loyang city. Then, of course, in Loyang, you have the Longmen Cave, which is this kilometer of statue and grotto. And this is, again, is going to be amazing in terms of the art we're going to see, but also the beauty and over the century, and very likely lots of also Chinese people doing Buddhist things. So it'll be a very lively event and place and cultural. And then, of course, we're going to go to Xi'an, which then you will have the famous artifacts. And then we're going to go to Wutaishan. And we've never been to Wutaishan. And Wutaishan is a really special Buddhist mountain. So we're going to spend a few nights there, and I think this is wonderful. And then, of course, we will be in Beijing when we arrive, when we leave. And again, in Beijing, you have many different temples and a lot of Chinese culture. So I think this is kind of going to be a very rich pilgrimage, a very rich travel. As Stephen pointed out, we are also a Sangha on the move, though it's going to be a different move, because when we go to India, we're in the bus all together. And here we're going to be together, but we might take a plane, a train. China is really big, and so we're going to take different transport. But again, Shantum is more au fait with, because he has traveled many times to China. And so I really kind of welcome you on this trip, and I hope you can join us.
No, thank you, Stephen and Martine. And yes, in fact, the first time I went was 82, a little before you, and then went again with Thich Nhat Hanh a few times. And you're both right. The Buddhism in China is now, I think, in some sense taken off. I've met a number of young Chinese people who are really, really deeply interested, both intellectually and in practice, in Buddhism, which wasn't there on my earlier trips, on my first trips, when it was much more controlled and much more, the practice wasn't so allowed. But I think for me, one of the important things, I think in a way, the key important thing is to travel with Stephen and Martine. I think whoever comes on journeys with them, and I know they're on the screen with me, are really, really fortunate to have this sort of time with them. And I feel for me, it's really not just a pleasure, but a great honor to travel with them on these pilgrimages. And we've been together to Burma, to Sri Lanka, and of course, a number of times in India. And I think each of those journeys is transformative for the people who come. And it's very deeply imprinted in my mind how I improve my understanding of the Dharma and of myself in the process. So I think that's the real special bit. China is important, and that is why we're going. But I think to have Stephen and Martine with us is really key. And many of you are coming because of that. And I think you don't get this sort of time and opportunity to be in such close proximity with your teacher. I think China is, I mean, we really don't know what's going on in China totally. And I think one of the things is to go there to find out for ourselves what is actually going on. We can never really understand what the press is saying, how the press is slanting it. So I think we're going to try and meet people there who can give us a better sense, maybe, because people are not always open about or not able to be open about what their real feelings are. But to try and understand the culture there and try and interpret it in our own little way. We're going to stay in rather comfortable places. We've chosen hotels which are really, the top hotels. And we found that is a very useful way of traveling or helpful way of traveling, because a lot of things are quite different to our habituated environment. To live in comfortable places is important, and then try and take comfortable transport, whether it's first-class trains or the planes. And I think I've learned that over the last 35, 40 years of organizing these pilgrimages, that it's important to travel in relative comfort in countries when we're not used to, whether it's the food or whether it's the basic amenities of life. One aspect I'd like to point out is which was not mentioned so much, is Xi'an, the wild goose pagoda in Xi'an, which is where Xuanzang spent a lot of time after he came to India, then took 600 odd manuscripts and then translated them there. And that's in Xi'an. Most of us hear about the terracotta warriors, but for me, that's a really important place of pilgrimage to go there and to understand how Xuanzang in the 7th century, in the middle of the Tang dynasty, goes and in a way comes to search for some of the Yogacara teachings in India, comes back and then translates them there. And then, of course, Dunhuang, where I haven't been since 82, but I'm really looking forward to going there. To Xining also, I went on that trip in 82 to those areas. And even in 82, I could see people who'd been obviously prostrating for days, coming down to Xining. So I think I'm really looking forward to it. I'm really looking forward to traveling together with Stephen and Martine. And whoever comes, I feel is very, very fortunate. I don't know whether we'll do this journey again also. That's another, it's a really rare opportunity. So if you're listening to this and you have any doubt, I'd say just go for it, because you don't know whether it'll happen again. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean.
Oh, and I'd like to add there's a little extension for those of us who would like to go after Wutaishan and Beijing to the Great Wall, just a 2 or 3 day extension. Those of us who'd like to touch the Great Wall of China north of Beijing. Thank you.
Bina, anything you'd like to say about the trip and the organization?
So thank you, Martine. I'm here just to make life comfortable for you, because I will help you with your extra nights, with your arrival transfers, your transfers at the end, and any personal stuff that you need, because I will be in constant touch with you on email. You can ask me your questions, and I'll keep giving you, as we go along, I'll update you on what's happening. And I can also help with the visa. You'll have to apply for the visa in your own country. I don't think that's difficult to get. But we can help with giving you a letter, a letter from that this is a tourist pilgrimage, and we'll get it from our local partners in China. So that will help you get the visa easily.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bina.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Peter, do you have any questions or comments?
I don't, Martine. I suppose I should think of something to ask, but I don't have anything top of mind. What you've explained has been very clear.
Thank you.
Maybe for the benefit of others, I'm curious if it will follow, each day will follow a similar rhythm as was done in India, or if there's another process.
No, exactly. You know, in the morning, if we can, again, it's kind of the conditions are a little different, but generally before breakfast, we like to do some sitting meditation together as a group, either in the hotel or in a suitable place. Then we have breakfast, and generally we go to the site. When we are in the site, we go into, generally we start with some meditation. We also give a talk. We also have discussion. And of course, we also visit the site together. So in each site, I think we'll have to see officially what we can do. Because we will be a group of about 20, 24, 25 people. So is there a place where we can gather? Is there a place where we can sit? And if the place where we can gather or we can sit, then yes, there will be Dharma talk, there'll be discussion, there'll be sitting meditation. And so we will do the same. And then in the evening, when we all go back, we often have what's called strikes, where we kind of talk about, you know, what struck us that day. So we will have that Sangha pilgrimage practice experience. So we endeavor to do it every day, but we'll have to see what are the conditions as a group, how we can gather, how can that work. But we'll have a Chinese guide. And I think the Chinese guide is going to help us to do this. My feeling is that we are going to go to actually a live place. We're not going to go to place which in a way you had Buddhists there kind of 1,000 years ago. We are going to places where, apart from Tungwang, we're going to places where you have Buddhists. So we're actually going to be with other Buddhists and lots of them. So we'll see how we can encounter them, share with them, which will be one of the beauty of the trip. And at the same time, with our little group, do the practice we want to do with the discussion and the Dharma talks. This will be very much part of the program.
Thank you.
Anything else anybody wants to add?
Yeah, I think these journeys with Stephen and Martine and the journeys of pilgrimage are very much journeys of practice and study, and in the sense that both Martine and Stephen are very knowledgeable on the Dharma, and also this sort of contrasting, comparing the different streams of Buddhism in the world. And I'm very interested in that. I've just done a pilgrimage in Vietnam and Laos, Cambodia, early Burma and Thailand. So I'm very interested in the culture of Buddhism. It's really inquiring into what's happening now in China. So I think that sort of flavor, understanding China, not just as in itself, but in the context of what is happening in the world of Dharma right now, and also historically, and then also practicing. I think, these are just not just journeys of information or informative journeys, they're really transformative journeys. So that ability to practice together and then to inquire into what the external is really affecting us in our own inward journey. I think that's what's very important in this sort of pilgrimage. And that's why we call it a pilgrimage rather than just a tour. It's really the inner journey informed by the outer journey. But China itself is a bit of a mystery, really is a mystery. Every time I've been, and I remember the first time I went, you read all about China and then you get quite a shock in terms of actually the reality of things. So I think it's one of those countries where you need to go yourself to really understand what's happening in that country.
And also we will have the great, I think Shantum coming is a teacher in the Plum Village tradition, has practiced a lot with Thich Nhat Hanh. And so he brings that community spirit and how you do things slowly, mindfully. And so he's also part of that. That's also the pleasure of being with Shantum and what he teaches us in the way he is and the way he encouraged us to be in terms of the silence, in terms of the walking, in terms of when we eat, and so that it becomes also like a practice in everyday life. I think this is one of the threads we will have in China is, in a way, it's also where Zen, when Chan started, and Chan is very much about being in the moment, is very much about simplification, and really kind of also maybe here we'll be more exploring kind of the questioning, what is this? And kind of bring a certain Son, Chan atmosphere, because that's a little bit some of our background, though we practiced it in Korea. And I think also it's very interesting to be in China in terms of Buddhism, because it's here where you have the first big transformation. Of course, you have transformation of Buddhism from the time of the Buddha and all what happened in India. But when Buddhism went to China, in a way, Buddhism changed China and China changed Buddhism. And this is something we will, and this is kind of like often when we look at modern Buddhism, Buddhism of this century, then often we think about the transformation that happened, because when Buddhism went to China, it went into a very high culture, and a culture which already had Confucianism and Taoism, very elaborate culture. And then it had to adapt to that culture, but at the same time, he brought some new concept into that culture. And I think that what happened in China with Buddhism is extremely interesting. And I think we might kind of look at this time to time during the travel. Okay, I think this is it.
I think Martine touches on. I think personally, it's very important to me because this school of Buddhism that I've been involved in for the last 30, 40 years, the primary teacher being Thich Nhat Hanh, has come from China. I mean, it's again this Zen school, the Yogacara school, and he used to study in classical Chinese. And so, in fact, often in the talks he'd start doing his calligraphy in Chinese and explaining things in Chinese. So, being Indian, I find it, really fascinating for me to go to China and then understand how this stream of Buddhism is now went through to other countries, into Vietnam, and how both the southern schools and the northern schools sort of mingle in Vietnam, and then how it's come back, at least for me, in India, and how to bring that back to India. And that's what, in some way, we're trying to revive the school of Buddha Dharma in India. And for me to understand what's happening in China now and what happened historically, and how this school developed there, how it's informed my own practice, is very helpful to me. And I think many of us who are especially involved in the Zen school, would be very, very interested in how China has informed our practice and the culture of China. I always find it's important to understand the culture within which the schools of Buddhism develop, because the culture informs to a large degree the interpretation of the way the Dharma is practiced. And so for me, looking at the Indian-Chinese combination of how, the Indian sort of much more, I would say, imaginative, creative type of mind that we have, and then the more sort of disciplined, I can't say linear, but it's sort of a more sort of clear-cut way of bringing teachings that have combined themselves into this. What I feel is what I've learned. So I think it's wonderful for me, and I think for anybody else too who's able to come on this journey.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.